And one of the things that I've been very impressed with you is that you've taken this foundation of social entrepreneurship that is, that is your ethos, right? Like you have that as your personal foundation.
It is, I think, critical for every company to have that ethos and to have that social mission, because it gets really rough, right? Entrepreneurship is tough.
Welcome to Seriously Connected. Today, we're going to talk about social entrepreneurship and the importance of having a clear business model. Today, Chen, the CEO and founder of Letterly, joins us to talk about her company and how she grew Letterly from an in-person school to an AI tool. Hi, everyone. I'm here with Chen. I've known Jane for a little while, and I'm super excited to talk to you today. Jane is the CEO and founder of Letterly. So if you could just open and just tell us a little bit about what Letterly is.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of Letterly. Letterly is an AI-powered writing coach that keeps humans in the loop. So basically, our goal and our mission at the end of the day is to democratize access to the liberal arts and make sure that every single student is able to have access to a personalized writing coach. We are solving for our national literacy crisis, and it's just been an absolutely incredible ride. We actually started out as a school, as a writing school or writing center with our own curriculum, and eventually we're able to scale to a point that we needed to develop a writing platform. We're looking to work with partners and schools now across the country. So we've so far served 3,000 students in 30 states and 7 countries. And yeah, it's been just really an amazing journey.
I think the best thing about you that I want to feature on this podcast, so I met you when you were doing the writing school.
Yeah.
And
at the Sty Plaza,
Starbucks. So I met you when you were doing the writing school. It was so cool to hear about that. And my favorite story, which I'm going to ask you to recount here, is you handing out flyers. Not here, but is you handing out flyers for this writing school. So do you want to just talk a little bit about your background and kind of from flyers to now AI tool?
I can't believe you remember that. That's amazing. Yes, it's just been an insane journey. And, it was really started from volunteer service. So in my prior life, I was in finance. I was an M&A banker, hedge fund analyst. But during the 10 years that I was on Wall Street, I was also volunteering with students, largely in first and second generation immigrant communities down in New York City. And I would literally be on the streets of like Bensonhurst, Bed-Stuy, Flushing, like downtown Harlem, like just handing out flyers. And everyone thought I was a scam. It's New York. And now I think about it, like, can you really blame them? And I also had my portfolio. I literally had a binder of my portfolio with like the lamination, just like showing people like, these are my edits. They're like, okay. So yeah, it was a really humbling experience. I would sometimes even go up to different after-school programs to be like, hey, can I come and help? And literally got shooed out the door. But that was really how it started. And I was very lucky to work with students on a pro bono basis for years. And eventually, I think it was at the end of 2019, where I was really thinking to myself, I was in my asset management job, and I was thinking to myself, like, if I died right now, would the world or the community have changed in any way? So philosophically, I believe that the world is a finite set of resources, and that it is our responsibility to make sure that when we pass on, we've contributed to the world as a net positive versus when we joined. And I really thought to myself, I was like, okay, like I'm doing well in finance, but is my way of giving back capital allocation? Right. I mean, there are great capital allocators out there and they should definitely, keep doing that. But is that my contribution? And I just wasn't sure about that. But I knew I was an awesome writer, and not even necessarily an amazing writer, because there are fantastic like authors out there. I'm very good at breaking down qualitative frameworks, in a sense, and putting them into quantitative constructs. And so I knew that I was very good at teaching writing. I was very good at scaling. And that's when I decided, with the encouragement of my students, to start a writing school. So that's what I did.
I love it. So I want to put a pin in like the grit that you just talked about and dealing with like just the ability to deal with uncertainty and ambiguity, because those are things that I look for in founders for sure. So I want to put a pin on that and come back to it. But you said something that is so, I think, meaningful, which is you basically described social entrepreneurship. So you know this, and I think by now the listeners know this, is I teach social entrepreneurship at the University at Albany. And most of the students, regardless if they're in that class or I have some other interaction with them, they all want to start businesses that have some social purpose, which is, I think, very new. At least my experience with undergraduates, I feel like that's very new. And one of the things that I've been very impressed with you is that you've taken this foundation of social entrepreneurship that is, that is your ethos, right? Like you have that as your personal foundation. And you've taken that and built some really incredible business models from it. So, we went over a little bit of what Letterly is, but could you talk about the business model of Letterly and how that ties into kind of this social mission that you have?
Sure, absolutely. Well, before I even get into sort of the business model itself, one of the things I would say, it is, I think, critical for every company to have that ethos and to have that social mission, because it gets really rough, right? Entrepreneurship is tough. I saw a video recently where they were describing entrepreneurship, not to freak anybody out to not do it, but it's like looking into the abyss and then eating glass.
Wow, that is intense, but
it's like super
pretty
intense.
Accurate. Pretty accurate, yeah.
It's a lot. And when you don't have a North Star, you give up, because it's like the purpose, right? When you're actually responsible for a greater good, you and your team, right? You also have to motivate the team. So when you and your team are really responsible for greater good, it keeps you going even during the dark times. And that's something that's definitely happened to me. So in terms of our business model, it took many years in the making. So, for anybody who thinks that they need to like nail down a business model on day one, that's just probably not going to happen. So Letterly is definitely the culmination of years and years now of lessons, especially starting at the writing school. We have 3 different channels with one product. So our first channel is Letterly Academy, and that is our legacy writing center. We have a very strong direct-to-consumer brand. So that is, where we sell our writing classes based on our curricula. I personally have recorded over 120 hours of curriculum that we have developed in-house. The second is Letterly for partners. So one of the really great things about our writing platform is that it can actually be white label. So it's not curriculum centric. It teaches you, it gives you the framework of how to write, and by partnering with other content providers, whether it's publications, it could be, and I can get into some examples, it could be different nonprofits, museums, libraries, etc., we are able to actually work together with partners as opposed to compete with them. So that is the second channel. And the third channel is Letterly for educators. That is basically using it as a tool in the classroom in conjunction with the teacher. And that is also the reason why the human in the loop element is so important for us. There are, as we know, a number of AI tools out there. We are the only one, surprisingly, that actually keeps humans in the loop for students. Really sort of clarifying the business model came about this year. Even though we started a writing center in January of 2020 and have done quite well since then, it was really through Blue Ridge Labs, which is the social entrepreneurship or social impact incubator within the Robin Hood Foundation, that clarified all of this through a lot of mentorship and just really amazing folks who have gone through this process before. And I definitely actually want to share some of the things that they taught us. It was amazing. But it was through them that we were able to really come up with, this business model.
And one of the things that we've talked about a couple of times on this podcast is that is starting a business in the capital region. What is here, what is not, what gaps exist, what can government do to fill those gaps? What can the private industry, just the private sector, do to fill those gaps? Do we need venture capital firms to be based here? Or are we just trying to attract venture investment here? And so I would love to I think we should talk about the Robin Hood Foundation in Blue Ridge, which I think is a fantastic organization. It's a great example, right? Because you had to go to New York City for this resource, but you're still located here. And so one of the things that I tell people all the time is that, our founders who are in the capital region, we don't have to recreate the Robin Hood Foundation in Albany, because we're a 2.5-hour train ride from these fantastic resources, and you can still start and grow your business in the capital region. So if you could just talk a little bit about how you found these external resources, right? Why you're still in the capital region, what your plan is for that, and maybe, and I'm kind of guessing here, but dispel the myth that if you're seeking resources outside of the capital region, you're not going to stay here and start and grow your business.
So first of all, one of the things that I didn't know until I moved up here is equidistant to Boston and New York.
Right.
It's literally just 3 hours,
right.
Either way, down 87 or 90. And it's actually and Montreal. Right. Mm-hmm. We actually have students in Canada as well. So first of all, the location is actually prime. So our core investor is in Boston, and then Blue Ridge Labs is in New York, and we're literally right in the middle of it. So even putting that aside, now I'm going to get super philosophical.
Please, that's what I love. I love you getting philosophical. So please get philosophical.
Yeah, there are two tracks here. One, I think this actually comes from my background on the hedge fund side. So hedge fund is a very big space. I specifically was a contrarian value investor. And what that meant is that we really wanted to think outside of the box. There definitely within finance, certain elements of groupthink. And it was really important for us to be able to take a step back and be like, okay, if we follow basically all the trends that all the other investors are doing, we're not going to get an edge in any way. Part of this is geographical and the folks you talk to and you surround yourself with. So why do I say that? Because the obvious startup hubs that you could think of, like Silicon Valley, New York City, they're incredible in terms of their resources and very, very rich. But in a way, it was almost beneficial for us to not be in it, but be near it. Similar to what we went through within investing. There is definitely the pressure to raise your seed, your pre-seed, your seed, your A, B, C, D, E, etc., right? And that's great. That's all fine. There are incredible unicorns out there that have gone through that path. And, when I was at Harvard, there are a number of other startup founders who are extremely successful who have done that. With that being said, I think what sets us apart is the fact that we actually started out with the school. And that's something I probably wouldn't have done if I decided to be a startup founder in the city. We bootstrapped for the first 3 years. We took out loans like small business, WMB loans from Pursuit, right, from CDFIs, back when it was 3%. Remember those days?
Yeah, those were beautiful days.
Those were nice days.
Yeah.
we're on the tail end of that, so I'm very happy, that worked out. But we were able to take on, 3% interest debt. And we were able to do that because we had a school. with revenue, with profit, with cash flow, right? That is very atypical when you're building a startup. But we're able to scale that in such a way that we are not necessarily sort of dependent on the capital markets. Like, of course, it would be great to get investors, but we're able to think more strategically about investors in terms of what can they bring to the table.
Well, you came into a venture-backed startup as an operator because you already had this experience. Do you know what I mean? Like, you had this experience of operating this company.
Yeah. And it gives us a lot more financing options. Like if we were able to scale Letterly Academy at a certain point, it's like, okay, that it might be more of a debt play, right? And then if we want to expand to schools, which is longer sales cycles, hey, maybe that's more of an equity play. And maybe there's a convert somewhere in between. Whatever it is, it gives us a lot of flexibility because we have a real product that people are actually paying for. As opposed to oftentimes when it's like a J-curve traction and then figuring out a business model from there, which obviously is a very successful model, but I really like where we are right now. So that is my philosophy of sort of being near but not in.
So here's my hot take for you today. What you need to do is you need to find the type A people in your life, whether it's an office or whether it's in your children's school, because all of them are going to be baking Christmas cookies and going around putting lights on everything, and you just need to ride their coattails. That's what I'll be doing, and I hope you will too. It's interesting because I have this, just for my own work and kind of my own practice, I have this opportunity to visit and to work with communities kind of across the United States. And I've been spending some time in Philadelphia with their startups down there, and they have a much more bootstrap culture.
Yeah.
It's very bootstrap culture in a good way. I mean that in a very positive way. You know, when I go in talking to them about, are you looking for people to invest? They're like, no, not yet, and they have such a proximity to New York. They're only an hour and 15 minutes by train from New York, but it's just a totally different culture. And then when I go down to New York City, it's just
like, what raise are you on?
Yeah, absolutely. What raise are you on? It's just a totally different culture. So I love that you talked about the capital region having some distance from that because it allows you to build something that is de-risked. It allows you to build something where you do have customers, you do have cash flow that is very unique for someone in a pre-seed seed kind of stage.
Yeah, and with the ability to scale, right?
Like, of course.
Something that is still venture scalable with that element. I think it also, what's really exciting, and it goes to sort of the second philosophy that I have, which is that if you look at just America, right, you've got your coastal cities and a huge brain drain in between. I mean, of course, there are pockets here like Austin and such, but I think if we have the opportunity to, we should be able to, spread the talent across the country. I think that's also something that's really important. And I think there are so many resources in the area to build a thriving startup ecosystem. You've got RPI right here in the backyard. You've got the government, right? You've got the state capitol, literally in Albany. I mean, I think that allows for all sorts of very interesting opportunities. And I bring that up because there are also angels here.
Yes.
The question is whether the startup, which is very much of a VC type startup is very much like 100x or zero, right?
Yep.
That attracts a certain risk profile. And one of the things that we'd like to think is that our startup, for instance, is de-risked in many ways, right? That it's not a bagel or 100x. And I think that by having those different type of companies in places like Philly, Albany, etc., I think it allows also to have a more diverse sort of investor base who wants to get in on something that can be 100x, right? but that doesn't mean you lose your shirt.
Right. And that is so well said. I feel like, and we can talk kind of very abstractly about this, but one of the problems that I see in the capital regions, there's not a ton of risk capital. Even for somebody like you who is de-risked, there is just not a ton of capital that's willing to be even remotely risky. So when I think about the angels in the area, many of them come from banking or they come from finance. And that's just a different mentality. It's just a totally different mentality. And so whereas in other markets, like when I'm in Philadelphia or when I'm in New York City or when I'm in even Denver, I see people much more willing to say, oh, I'm going to write a $100,000 check into this company, or even a group of people saying we're going to do a $100,000 check into this company and see where it goes. I don't see that as much here. I see a lot of obstacles to that what I perceive to be, just from working in finance, venture, like a $100,000 check is such a small amount of money for a company that has the ability to 100x, right? Like, I mean, that is, so if we can't get, I sometimes get frustrated because if we can't get 5 people together to write one $100,000 check into a company that will allow them to prove out their product market fit or prove out their business model or prove out whatever, I get frustrated by that. But then, to be honest, I also get frustrated by founders because they make very unreasonable, completely unreasonable asks. They say, like, we want the money for, it's not even talent acquisition. It's like, we want the money for our salaries to live, or we want it's nothing that will grow the company. It's like what is already existing in the company. And so I feel somewhat like there's education on both sides to be had, like educating the angels in this area, but then also educating the founders on what is a good ask at that stage.
I'm going down this like philosophy
rabbit hole. I like philosophy and abstract. We're good.
I have so many business philosophies. But one of the things is that it's very much like what's in your control and what's not in your control, right? And right now I'm a founder. So when I was an investor, I can teach myself to think a certain way. Right now I'm a founder, and it's my job and responsibility to be responsible stewards of people's capital.
Right.
Right? Like, absolutely. That is, like, to your point, like, founders don't do the smartest things. It doesn't even matter where you are. If you're in a capital region, the city, or Silicon Valley, certainly, right? Yep. You have to be smart with how you spend other people's money. Like, it's so important. Like, what is, like, the main rule? It's like, rule number 1, don't lose money. And rule number 2, like, don't forget about rule number 1.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And I think having that mindset in terms of what can I control, which is not lose other people's money, it also forces me to be creative. I can't just throw out money on a $7,000 marketing campaign with no visibility into the ROI. I actually remember this very clearly. Somebody was like, oh, you should look into Google AdWords or, and SEO and social media marketing, and all very important things, right? When it comes to marketing. But also it's very expensive. So I was starting to invest money in there, and I was like, I'm not getting any sales. But they're like, no, you have to spend an X amount in order to see how you feel and to test it out. And I was like, yeah, we're going to cut the program.
Right.
We're going to cut it. I'm going to cut my losses now. I've done the test. I know it's important to do. When we do our C raise or B raise or whatever, then I can throw in the marketing money. But right now, we have let me just think, my LTV to CAC ratio is over 10x.
It's amazing.
Why on earth would I do that?
Yeah.
I'm purely referral.
Yeah.
Every one of my students is either returning student or referral.
It's amazing.
And so why would I do that?
Right.
Right, right now, at least.
So you talked about, don't lose money and don't forget not to lose money, so, which I feel is such good advice. Another, I think, problem that smaller markets have is when they see one failure, like one angel lose $15,000, then they're less likely to invest in other companies. When really, I mean, you and I both know that investing in early stage companies is risky. It's risky. Yeah. And so if somebody does it one or two times and they go to zero, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't continue to do it, right? And so I do think that there is, it's almost like when I talk to angels or investors, what I want to say to them is like, hey, pick a number that you're willing to invest in 10 companies. Like pick a number. It can even be $100,000. You're investing $10,000 into each company, right? Pick a number. Or start, or don't even start to make investments as an angel. Start to mentor people and see, who you find, right? Because if you have a founder who's you see this all the time. I mean, I see this, you see this, is like you have somebody who's doing really, really well. I mean, who raises millions of dollars and then they go to zero because that happens, or they just return the money that has been invested in them because that happens. That is a feature of venture. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's a pleasant feature, but like that is a feature of venture. Mm-hmm. So I do sometimes get frustrated when I see people who say like, oh, I invested in a company one time and it didn't pan out.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some like psychological bias.
Right.
Like there's definitely, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It's like a mental model, but it happens. Like, oh, I had a bad experience at this restaurant. This must be a horrible. Like, I'm not going to go.
Great analogy.
Yeah, it's like
it's true.
So many different variables, but it just sticks with you. And I mean, that is one of the reasons why I talk about like what can we do as founders to control what's in our control. But there is an investor who you would need a certain risk tolerance.
Right.
There has to be an appetite for it.
And I sometimes think that, early investments, what you really want from somebody is the ability to have them help you raise more money. Not necessarily specifically them, but have their money get you to a place where you can raise more money and more. I mean, even the way that investors invest on either a safe or a convertible note, like those necessitate a priced round for them to have equity in the company. You know what I mean? Like, and so there is this, I think, misnomer that, you can invest money and then walk away, or, those early stage investors, when founders take them on, should be people who can help them with that next raise, who can help them with their product market fit, who can help them with customers. So Jane, every episode we have a business lesson. So it's really a lesson for anybody who's listening. Most of the audience members are women from the Capital Region. So if you have a specific business lesson that you would like to share, I would love to hear it.
I actually don't know if it's going to be women specific, but it's a really cool lesson. It's a really awesome lesson. It was from the CEO and founder of Coinstar. So are you familiar with Coinstar? Yes. Okay, right. So you go to a grocery store, you have all your change, you dump it in a machine, you might get something that you can use in a grocery store. You need to find a business model where everybody wins. Everybody has to win for it to truly be sustainable. And it goes back to the idea of social entrepreneurship and social innovation, because there are really three players that you're optimizing for. The private company, so your company, the startup, you have to think about the social element, and you have to think about the public element. So what was so cool about Coinstar, for example, they themselves, they're a private company. Okay. They built these kiosks effectively, but then they found a model where they were able to improve the lives of so many low-income communities by going into those grocery stores first. So you were saving them money. You're saving folks money with all of this change and actually using it for food in the grocery stores while also increasing foot traffic to those stores, which is great. But on the public side, it just blew my mind. I don't know the exact numbers. I could be off by like 10, 100x, who knows? But they were saving the U.S. Mint billions of dollars.
Wow.
So they actually caught the attention of the Mint, who is like, what is this company that's saving us on like all of these coins across the country? And that's how Coinstar actually overnight grew and exploded, because the government got Coinstar into the grocery stores. The UK then picked it up and was like, what is this random kiosk like saving the mint, like all the billions of dollars or whatever? Literally, they called a meeting with the Coinstar CEO and they put a kiosk in literally every single community in the UK overnight. And that is a perfect model of where everybody wins. And so finding tri-sector innovation, that's what I call it. You can go at tri-sector innovation. It's really cool and it forces you to be imaginative. And that's something that we're doing, which is we wanted to find models where everybody wins. So if we work with a publication, they have another, like an additional source of revenue, right? They're able to also help their kids. If a nonprofit is funding the student, then like literally everybody wins. And those are the type of models that we're interested in. So,
I love the business lesson of find a business model where everybody wins, because I totally agree that will just increase your likelihood of sustainability.
I love my investors. We currently have 3 investors on the table. So we did a family and friends round a few years ago, right when we started, and they're incredible. They're from the finance world. As a husband and wife, I've known them since college. They're like amazing. They're my best friends. But one interesting thing is that the wife is actually the one who introduced me to no code. Like no-code platform. She was chief of staff at Bubble.io, which basically is like the pioneer in no-code world. And because of that, I was able to prove out my platform using very little money on Bubble, which was like fantastic. We built our MVP for $35,000. Amazing. Get this, in 1 month.
Wow.
And we had 400 paying customers at the end of that month on the MVP. Wow. Like, obviously more than paid itself, but even putting that aside, it's about proof of concept. So when people tell me, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't prove my concept without like $100,000, $1 million, or what, I'm like, no. You're just not thinking creatively enough, right? Or you're not putting in the work. I did not sleep for that month. No chance. I was just basically learning how to be a product manager and the UI, UX person, like on the fly. Yeah. Not recommended. Yeah. Right? But that was wild. So that was like really amazing from my family and friends round. And then the other 2 folks, one is Robinhood. So for those who don't know, Robinhood is the largest poverty-fighting 501c3 down in New York City. We're one of the first 7 for-profit startups they've ever invested in, right? So it's obviously that's just a tremendous network. After-school programs, charter schools, Title I schools, etc. So obviously it's going to be a tremendous resource. And then we have a pretty sizable investor out in Boston who's definitely helping us on the partner side. So through them, we're talking to a couple of museums, which we're very excited about, and libraries out in Boston. And so having those different relationships, I mean, it's very, very important. It's critical.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think if you could, for listeners today, if you could just talk about, because we're down the philosophy and an abstract route, if you just want to talk about just those relationships, how did you find, not specifically, but how did you put yourself in a position to find investors? How did you put yourself in a position to find customers? What did that look like for you almost granularly, like on a day-to-day? Like, what did you do to kind of put yourself in a position? Because my philosophy is, the philosophy that I have is that, it's a very like Benjamin Franklin philosophy, which is that you don't necessarily have luck, right? You put yourself in a position, you prepare for opportunities that might come your way. And I just see you do that over and over and over again, where you are, and maybe it's not conscious, but you prepare yourself. You prepare yourself to accept like fantastic opportunities that come your way. So I don't know if you want to speak to that in terms of relationships.
Yeah, no, thank you. There is this really great saying. It's something like, oh, this was what it was. Luck is preparation meets opportunity.
Love it.
It's a good line.
It's a great line.
Because it's true.
Yeah.
It's totally true. And, well, I'll actually tell you two completely, like, wild, like, just showing up stories. Oh, my God, if they're on this, if they listen to this, it's, like, mildly embarrassing. But I'm going to do it anyway. So the first is how I heard about the Robinhood program. You'd think it was through, like, Harvard Network, or City Network. I'm from the city, right? And I'm very active in DEI programs down in New York City as a scholarship student and all that. You'd think that's where it's from. No, like literally not even. It was from a guy who's a regular at the Thirsty Owl.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
Isn't that wild?
Yes.
Yes. There is this wonderful gentleman who is a regular at the Thirsty Owl. And that's how, through mutual friends, I learned about the Blue Ridge Labs program within Robinhood.
That's so funny.
That is hilarious because I knew Blue Ridge Capital, being like working in like the long short hedge. I had no idea what Blue Ridge Labs was, but yeah, it was started by Ken. It was started. Name is escaping me. But anyway, the guy who ran Blue Ridge Capital started Blue Ridge Labs. And I was like, oh my God, my worlds are colliding. Worlds are colliding. That. So it's just about showing up, I guess, to places.
Yeah.
Like just every, like if as long as you show up, right?
Yep. That's
the most important thing. The second completely wild one is it's actually not even about investors. It's about my team. I have best director of education. Her name is Anya. She's actually been here before doing a marketing day. If you go on to Letterly's Instagram, she's everywhere. And I actually found, this sounds so weird to say like I found her, but like I guess. So she's from the Capital Region. She did her undergrad and grad school and education from UPenn. And so there was really no reason for us to cross paths. It's because I was taking a train from Albany down to New York City, and I was sitting next to this wonderful, wonderful gentleman named Will. And I was asleep on the train the entire ride. You know, when you just like do your own thing on a train. He was sitting next to me. And he was reading, like, the philosophy of life. I didn't even think about it. I was like asleep. And then at the end, I hear him tell somebody else that he was a PhD student and teaches literacy to kids. And immediately I just turn around to him, like, I wake up out of a daze. I turn to him, and I'm like, we're in desperate need of editors. I know I've been sitting on this train with you for the last 2.5 hours and I haven't talked to you, but I really want to exchange contact info right now because I think we got to connect. And he's like, okay.
That's great.
And then turns out he lived like 3 blocks from my parents in the city. So we ran into each other in the subway. We got coffee and he's like, you've got to meet my friend Anya. I think she would be an incredible editor as well. Like almost 2 years later, she's our director of ed.
I love it.
Isn't that crazy?
And those stories, I mean, it happens, I think, over and over again if you're open to the possibility of that. You know, if you're like an open person. And so I think just like the everyday. I mean, I was explaining. So my wife says over and over again, like, I don't understand what you do. And I kind of want to be like, I feel that's because you don't want to listen to what I do. But I was explaining to her just last night about, she was like, how, like, how were you in this position? And I told her, and it probably took 15 minutes. I'm not going to relay it right now, of like explaining a 8-year like chain of people that like got me in front of this one person who's going to kind of like, I think, really impact one of the projects that I'm working on. And she was like, yeah, I don't understand what you do.
So for years, my husband, who knows, he might still think that now, is that I'm an English teacher and I teach writing. And I'm like, yeah, that's close enough. We're
That's
good.
close enough.
Well,
That's right.
Let's stick with that.
That's right. I love it. Well, it's been so awesome to have you on the show. It's been so fantastic to catch up. Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening. This is the second episode in December, which is my last month hosting Seriously Connected. I want to hear if you liked this podcast, so please reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know if I should continue it.